So anyone could feel free to ask any questions here on IG Live. But other than that, we were kind of we've been covering a lot of the different ingredients, and MCT has been a hot one that we started blogging about, and this will happen on occasion. I had a blog post that just got out of control, and it's like 60 citations. We're going down all sorts of rabbit holes, and it made me realize, even though I do eat some foods that do contain decent amounts of MCTs, it made me realize that I want to start supplementing MCT on its own again. And so NMB Nutrition has C8 Vantage, and it is based upon C8 or a Caprylic acid, and this is a powder-based MCT supplement. So can you kind of give us the breakdown on the real, like the elevator pitch on MCTs first off, and then we could talk a little bit about C8 Vantage as well?
Yeah, it's the medium chain triglycerides. There's short chain, long chain, and how you define medium chain varies from kind of definition to definition, but it's like in that C6 to C12 range. Typically, we most likely look at like the C8, C10, and that's what's in MCTs.
Okay, can you define what C8 and C10
Oh,
are?
yeah. So it's
back you up, yeah.
Yeah, 10 carbon fatty acid and an 8 carbon fatty acid. And the 8 carbon, like you said, is caprylic acid, and this is in the triglyceride form, so it's 3 of them with a glycerol backbone. And it pretty much is tasteless. That's one of the great things about MCTs, but they actually are used in the food industry to enhance flavor. So that's a really cool thing. Like typically, like stuff like this, it's like, you know, you hope to get some ergogenic benefit, but it's actually tastes terrible or it mixes terrible.
Right.
And this stuff mixes in great as an oil. It's a light oil, but we have it as C8 Vantage as a powder, so it's super, super convenient. And then you should ask, well, how does it get powderized? A lot of this stuff gets powderized on maltodextrin and things like that. Mm-hmm. This gets plated on tapioca fiber and pea protein. And so it has 0 glycemic response, and it's a prebiotic, as well as providing some additional amino acids. So, and it's about 75% MCTs to the powder, and so 25% powder. And then of the MCT that's provided, it's I think it's about 95 to 98% C8. So this is pretty pure when it comes to C8. And maybe typical MCTs that you'd get are like 50% C8, 50% C10. Mm-hmm. And this C8, you might ask, like, why is C8 better? Because it's more ketogenic. It enhances the development of ketones from the liver. So that would be why.
Yeah, so yeah, our blog post, we show that there's a chart from the study, and it's actually like kind of seen, for whatever reason, it was delayed, but later on the ketone spike there's a good ketone spike, but then it way enhanced like downstream. So C8 seems to provide some really cool stuff. Now I don't mean to correct the master or anything, but you said a lot of MCTs out there are kind of 50-50 C8, C10. That's just for the C8, C10 ones. A lot of them include C12, which
right. Yeah.
And like that, if you look at coconut oil, so most of the stuff is extracted first off from either coconut oil or palm oil, right?
Correct.
Or maybe a mixture of both. So looking at the fatty acid profiles, and this is all on our blog, we see, and I think I may have forgotten to include the table, so I need to do that. So there's a table on one of these studies that shows the fatty acid breakdown of coconut oil and then of standard MCT oil. And standard MCT oil obviously is like all MCTs, but it's a ton of the C12. And coconut oil not only has a ton of C12, but it also has some of the longer chains too. It's a really cool saturated fat. Obviously, I love to cook with it and everything. And you can get a ketone spike if you're fasted is eating coconut oil. I have a video doing that. It was pretty cool. But at the same time, the research is starting to show, though, that the C8 and C10, but especially C8, if you're looking for like extremely quick acting, enhanced like beta-oxidation and extremely like no processing by the liver and like incredibly fast ketone generation, it seems like C8 is where it's at. And with C12, lauric acid, a lot of the good oils that you see on Amazon, they're like advertising C8 and C10 together or just C8 alone. They try their best to remove the lauric acid, which is the C12, and that because that has like what's kind of blogged about as a pit stop in the liver. And I don't know if that's exactly right, but it's close enough for like what I saw. And in the blog post, I have a better quote from a study regarding like kind of the mechanism. But it seems like the C12 doesn't work as well for what we want it to do, although it's not bad. It's just not awesome like C8 is what like kind of my quick explanation.
Yeah, what's interesting is C12 is actually really potently antibacterial, antiviral. One of my top immune health supplements actually revolves around that as monolaurin.
Okay.
Very reasonable in price, and again, like I think one of the absolute best things that you can take if you have autoimmune issues, or certainly maybe in this time of the COVID-19 crisis.
Right. Yeah, and we could definitely get into that. It's interesting because we were digging into the research, and there's no in vitro, there's no in vivo research on humans regarding immune response from MCTs. But it seems like there's like 5 legit studies in vivo in like the petri dish, in vitro, in the petri dish, showing that MCTs seem to kick up an immune response from in various ways. And one of the studies is actually on respiratory cells, which I thought was like fascinating. So we can't make claims because this is petri dish stuff, and there's no like human-based research on actual living human beings and all that with just MCT. But it seems like the mechanism is there, and in general, it seems like to me, MCT can be part of a very healthy diet, and I'm very pro. At least for part of the day, I'm very pro anything that's going to help you kick up a few ketones. There's too many people out there who haven't like experienced ketones since they were like born, and I think there's a lot of therapeutic and protective benefits from them. So I think it could be part of the puzzle, but we can't really. I don't think we can really make like direct immune, claims based on MCT. But there seems to be a connection, at least somewhere around there, beating around the bush, or possibly eventually we'll get some sort of better data.
Well, with type 2 diabetes, we know that that's high risk for the COVID-19 as well.
Yep.
And that there's some correlation there. And we know that when you take MCTs or when ketones are elevated, that suppresses blood glucose and would enhance insulin sensitivity and also improve mitochondrial dysfunction, improve insufficient cellular energy states, etc. So to me, it makes sense that there would be some correlation there, above and beyond, like maybe if there are antibacterial, antiviral effects of some of these other fatty acids that could be directly beneficial. The indirect definitely makes sense.
Yeah, I agree. I'm just cautious about that because, I would get concerned about someone having a terrible fast food only diet or whatever, or eating all this processed food. A lot of people still don't know how to cook, so they're ordering takeout like crazy, and they're getting all sorts of junk. And then adding MCT to that, I'd be afraid of like the lipstick on a pig kind of situation with MCT. Whereas like something like berberine, I almost think like berberine is like can overwhelm some of that pig. And I'm not 100% convinced that adding MCTs on top of a 5,000 calorie diet is really going to help that much. It is going to add more calories at the end of the day. The cool thing is the C8 MCTs don't seem to be they're directly like they're sent right to ketones, and it doesn't seem like they are stored as fats. So that's why I think is really cool, especially for like brain health issues. You don't seem to need to be in ketosis to be able to generate the ketones. So that's what's really exciting about the C8, maybe the C10 as well. But I still I'm concerned, like just because you have a bottle of MCTs doesn't mean you could have a 5,000 calorie diet if you're well in caloric excess. Whereas with something like berberine, I would be a little bit more aggressive on the claims because I think you can, like, I could eat a lot more junk with berberine, like with the dihydroberberine or glucovantage from NMB. We've talked about that. And so I'm a little bit more confident with the claims there. I don't think MCT's there personally for me yet to like make that kind of claim, but I do think that it seems like a lot of the studies replacing other foods or other chains or like polyunsaturated fatty acids like the omega-6s that I'm very against, replacing those salad dressings with MCT, I think is like, it's a two-banger because you're getting rid of the junk and you're adding in what I believe to be an essential fatty acid. I do believe, in our blog post, I kind of go not off the rails, but I really defend saturated fats because MCT at the end of the day, it is a saturated fatty acid. And I'm a huge proponent of saturated fat. I think that When we removed it from our diets starting in the 1970s, that's when all hell broke loose, and people are just constantly hungry. There are studies on MCT and on other fatty acids such as stearic acid, the longer chain saturated fat, that promotes satiety. And to me, I think people should, if you're trying to diet, you got to chase satiety. Chase what makes you actually full for long periods of time. Don't chase calories. So this is a big thing I'm going to be on this decade at least. And so MCTs are a huge piece of that. And anyway, I've kind of derailed a little bit, but yeah, there's like so many benefits. Oh, anyway, so yeah, using it to replace other foods that make you hungry in an hour, I think is where like the real magic is for me for MCTs.
Agreed. Anything that's going to increase ketones is going to, when you enhance like plasma BHB, like you're going to decrease your hunger, increase satiety, the satiety effect. So
is that what you think the connection is?
100%. And I mean, that's been shown, like the direct correlation that, and it makes sense. Like, I mean, when you're in that starvation mode, one, you want BHB to be cellular energy so you can get food, find food, right? And then two, you want it to protect muscle because lean body mass is so critical when you're starving. And then three, you want your appetite to drop so that you can focus. I mean, there's going to be a period where there's leptin and ghrelin and insulin and blood glucose playing into your appetite. But once, that's like the whole thing, like when you push through, like in fasting, when you kind of push through that initial hunger and you get to like that point of clarity and you get to that point of like, wow, I'm not hungry anymore. Like that's when you get the clarity and the no hunger thing, that's BHB like skyrocketing.
Yeah, right.
And that's like the experiential effect of BHB. So like you can simulate that by taking higher levels of like exogenous ketones or the C8 MCTs or dihydroberberine or all three. All those are going to help increase ketone levels.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, big on intermittent fasting. In terms for me, I just need to make sure when my window is open, I eat enough because like getting deep enough into a fast, you get focused, it feels great, and then there's like a balance where it's like I'm getting to the point where I'm hungry enough to like want to break it, but I'm enjoying my fast so much, and at some point the hunger overwhelms, or I want to train and I crush my carbs a little bit post-workout and then start the process back over. But yeah, there's definitely a connection. You mentioned leptin, and there's a couple other hunger hormones that MCT does seem to work on too. So that's why I was kind of curious that you think it's the BHB. This stuff does like a ton of different really cool things. But yeah, so what's your take on taking MCT during a fast? Let's say one thing we didn't mention with the C8 Vantage is that NMBs, and they're going to be sending me hopefully a care package so I could actually do a video showing the close-ups and stuff. There's a dairy-based one coming as well that's, instead of plating on pea protein and tapioca, it's going to be, I don't know what the fiber is going to be, but it's going to be a milk protein too, which will be a lot smoother and better tasting for those who don't need to be vegan and all that. So so let's say I'm drinking coffee, and I'm fine with black coffee personally, but if I only want to have, I need a coffee creamer. And I also like intermittent fasting. So what's your take on using MCTs during a fast? Do you have like a threshold, or do you care? No? Like how crazy do you get about it now?
That's a really good question, and one I get a lot. Yeah, and I don't know why my screen, oh, there it goes, popped in. Anyway, yeah, I don't know. That's tough because if you're looking to get like the, the detoxing benefits supposedly, like with, cleaning out your cells, etc., like, then, people argue that you shouldn't have any calories, you shouldn't have any food. But I'm like, if you're trying to lose weight through fasting, if like that's your goal, it just depends on what the goal is with fasting. But I do think like using ketones or using MCTs is okay. Like if you're, especially if like, I mean, look, like it's not like you're one and done with fasting, right? Like, I mean, this is like a journey that you get used to, and you're going to upregulate MCT transporters, and you're going to, get used to how this feels and like how BHB is experienced and how like the hunger aspects are experienced. So if it helps you get to, like, my argument is it helps you go longer, then that's amazing. Like, then do that. Like, there's always like these fasting police of like, that's not legal. That's not okay. Like, that's, and it's like, that doesn't make sense. Like, so if you need to have caffeine in your coffee or you need to have some supplements, it's okay. Like, oh, the supplements have like,
it's got rice flour in the
yeah, exactly. Like, or yeah, like, is having ketones okay? Is having bone broth okay? Is having MCTs okay? Like, to me, like, if your goal is to just lose weight and lean up and get used to what it's like to, go longer periods without eating, then it's okay. Like, it helps that goal. Like, it helps you go longer and not eat, like, when you're having cravings. And cool, like, it gets you deeper into ketosis so you don't have those cravings.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that those debates and the autophagy thing comes up. And
right.
Missing the forest for the trees, in my opinion. So.
And autophagy isn't just on or off. Like, it's not that simple. Like, exercise increases autophagy. Like, there's like a lot of aspects to autophagy and degrees of autophagy and whole cell autophagy and kind of inner cell autophagy, and there's just, it's not that simple. Like, people make it like it's on, kind of like muscle protein synthesis. It's like they talk about it like it's on or off, and you want it on 24/7, and it's just not how it works.
Right. Yeah, so I don't think I have much else. Like, just in the process of researching the whole MCT thing, it's kind of convinced me to throw it back in there. I add some to my protein shakes. I've noticed that some of our favorite protein shakes are actually using C8 Vantage, like Nutrex's plant protein. I don't know if they're using C8 Vantage in their ISOFIT, but they're using MCT in there as well. I don't know. It seems like the MCT is a great way to cream up a product without like throwing in like disgusting ingredients or what I consider to be disgusting. So I've really been on the boat and jumping in more. And I personally think that if I need to extend my fast, MCT gets me a little bit further along personally. And I'm not doing that for any weight loss reasons. I'm doing it because I like the focus. And if I'm buried into work, I'm not going to go and break and cook, and I haven't properly bulk cooked enough lately. So it's been chaos out here. So that's kind of my situation. There's a question: how does it work? So, Afan, if you want to ask, what specifically are you asking? How does MCT work? Or I'm not sure what the question is, but yeah, we'll catch up on that. And that's pretty much it. We have this blog post on the blog, and I kind of went out of control there, but I said a lot of stuff. Like, first off, saturated fat is not unhealthy. I don't think you should be eating a ton of carbs and fats, whether it's saturated fat or polyunsaturated or anything at the same time. I believe in kind of splitting those up personally, but there is no connection between saturated fatty acids and heart disease. The 4 studies that the American Heart Association uses to try to say you should have a low saturated fat diet are from like the 1960s and 1970s, and they're garbage data. They're smokers. There's so many compounds. Terrible data. So we talk about some of that, and then we talk about different types of fatty acids, and then we get into the MCT research, and then we like bury into like the C8 research. So you can check out that blog. I don't think I have a whole lot of other details to talk about. There's a whole lot of like studies there. So that's about it for me. How does it work? MST. Okay, I think he's asking how MCT works. We briefly covered it earlier, but MCTs are medium chain triglycerides, and the medium means like the number of carbon bonds that are inside of these fatty acids. And there's a saturated fatty acid, well known in coconut oil, and when they're taken, they help reduce appetite, but they also increase the amount of ketones that are produced. And the shorter chain fatty acids kind of contribute directly to like really fast energy, almost as fast as like a carbohydrate, because the shorter chain fatty acids don't require any processing in the liver, and they don't get stored as fat. They get turned into ketones, which your body can use as an alternate energy supply. So MCTs really have this really cool effect where it's like kind of like a fat, kind of like a carb, but like to me, the best of both worlds. That's my quick elevator pitch on MCTs. And so we're big fans of the C8 and the C10 MCTs, although there's a lot of benefits from all of them. And I'm a very pro-saturated fat person. And so, yeah, that's kind of like my whole little spiel there. Now, one thing I was going to mention, though, it is stated in a lot of different studies that MCTs have 8.3 calories per gram, as opposed to longer chain fatty acids just have 9, maybe 9.1 calories per gram. I went down the rabbit hole a little bit on this. There's studies that just say this, and there's a book that says this, that it was done through bound calorimetry. I never could find a study showing that it was actually 8.3 calories per gram. So at some point, I might have to get a bound calorimeter and actually find out, because I don't know, that's been a little itch that there's all these studies and like these researchers just say it flat out. Oh, it's 8.3 calories per gram. I can't find the actual data. I don't know if, Sean, you've ever like cared to look, but
no,
it's really,
that's fascinating.
It's a detail. Yeah, so
that's
it's
fascinating.
And I kind of believe it, like that. Not everything is going to work the same in a bound calorimeter, but it's like when we started drilling down in 2014 on the amino acid spiking thing, and you realize like, oh my God, the definition of the word protein is like based on like 1800s technology. It's way antiquated. We start believing like weird things. I want to see some original data on if this MCT is really 8.3 calories per gram. But as of right now, that's kind of what's like kind of just thrown out there, and I've never seen the source on that. So that might be my little mini mission at some point.
That's fascinating, and it may be different from fatty acid to fatty acid. I mean, there may be.
Agreed.
Yeah, so that's really interesting. There's a question on.
Two things right here.
Yeah, and looking to get a higher yield of a particular extract, is that something Sean can help with? Yes, that's exactly what Ingredientology does, is novel ingredients, novel delivery systems like, liposomes and micelles, like, or microencapsulation, but yeah, certainly like trying to get a different yield of a bioactive out of an extract using different extraction methods. And again, like different synthesis methods, like fermentation, which is really hot right now. That's an area of an expertise.
And so that was asked by Nutristat, who actually has a really cool native whey protein powder. I really love the blueberry flavor. They have a liquid glycerol that I hadn't used yet. I do have it because I've been injured a little bit, haven't been pumping up enough, and I think I might be ready to rock that one out. It's like straight on. If you want 25 grams of straight glycerol, you just take it to the dome and see what happens. And then they have this new ingredient called bio-ATP. So some stuff we might eventually write about. It's just been so crazy busy. So they have some innovative stuff. So I'm interested in what Nutristat has. Let's do an introduction, an email, and we'll make that work. And but yeah, that is, long story short, that is what Sean can do, and they make it happen. It seems like we're tasking them with a couple other things that we haven't talked about. So, and then second, I like this question because we might get two different answers here. But Ibernalis is asking, do I have to eat a lot of fat in my diet to be in keto? Sean? Oh, I don't know who's. I can't hear Sean right now.
Can you hear me now?
Can everyone? Yeah, I can. Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Your
All right,
Bluetooth
cool.
killed you. Okay.
Yeah. My answer is technically no, because it's really just fat is kind of filling in the gap, so to speak. Keto is about being very, very low carb, and yes, it is typically a high fat diet, but it's because you're trying to get enough energy calorically. But if you don't mind losing a ton of weight, you can still get in ketosis by being ultra low carb and being moderate with your protein. So you're really just trying to fill in that energy gap calorically with the fat. So that's usually that's why you can get into ketosis with fasting. You're not having anything. You don't need to have fat per se. So.
Right, but at the same time, there are a little bit of nuance. There are some certain essential fatty acids that are very important to get. Now, if you're going like hardcore in
long term, yeah.
If you go low fat, only protein, you can get into a situation known as rabbit starvation, and it can be dangerous.
Yeah.
What we're talking about, and this is like if you're in life or death, like I know doctors that do this, it's a protein sparing modified fast. If they're at like morbid obesity, life or death situations, it needs to be managed by a doctor. But you can go just enough like fish oil and just enough fatty acids to appease the essential fatty acid part of the equation, and then start burning your own fat and everything. And if you're only eating protein, like borderline misery, very, very dangerous to do without the doctor's help. So you got to be careful with that. To me, it's like you want just enough fat to work on satiety, because like I said, I think you just need to appease your appetite and to get enough energy. It's very inefficient to be using protein for energy. It's also expensive to be using protein for energy. So the fat is there for just enough energy to keep you going and make you happy and have you feel full. And then the protein for the muscle is my opinion. And then at that point, you can start drilling down and fasting further and further as you get more and more fat adapted. If you jump right into it though, you're going to want to switch into, I think, a high fat diet, just to you got to do something to kick that carb craving, maybe some sweeteners if you got to. And then eventually though, you're going to be fat adapted where your body's no longer working on glucose or sugar because you haven't been eating it. You've burned off a lot out of your liver. And then at some point the switch starts to flip. And then you're going to be eating all this fat, but it's your body's not going to burn fat if you keep providing it with a lot of fat. So at that point, you can start lowering the amount of dietary fat, and then see what works. And the ratios are different for everyone, especially with women, especially with menopausal women. I see everyone has different opinions. People who are leaner seem to be doing better on higher protein diets. People who are bigger can there's a little bit more leeway because you have a lot of fat on your diet. So it really it depends. So that's my more nuanced answer. But at the end of the day,
no, I totally agree. That's when I'm saying it is just technically to get into ketosis, do you need the fat? No.
No,
but
right.
Absolutely. Yeah. If long term, I wouldn't want someone eating a 400 calorie diet or something like that of low carb, moderate protein. It literally to get the 1800 calories or whatever you need, ideally that's being made up of with fat. And that's why typically it's, 70 to 75% fat as calories. And I agree with you, the more muscle mass you have and the more active you are, then the more leeway you have with carbohydrate tolerance as well as protein tolerance. And I think you can have the 25, 30, 35% protein calories if you're a more muscular, training male. And this is one of the reasons why a more sedentary, less active, lower muscle mass female, tends to be I'm at 20 grams of, carbohydrates and I'm still not getting deep enough into ketosis. That's a big factor is how active you are with your muscle and how much muscle you have, because that has the GLUT4 translocation and, you're using more calories and there's a whole lot of aspects to it, but yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of testing that should be that you kind of need to do on yourself. If you could afford it or get a prescription, it's tough right now, but getting a constant glucose monitor, I learned so much. And for me, what I realized, one of the hammers that, one of my opinions is that I don't think you're going to truly burn a lot of body fat until you clear out the liver fat first. And the way I clear out all the glycogen around is with high intensity interval training. For me, that is the lever that just rocks it for me personally. It's hard for a lot of people to do that. So we had a question, and so there's a lot of it depends answers, and I think a lot of it does depend, on sex, size, age, all that stuff. But are you doing a question? Yeah. So we're doing a Q&A right now. I guess so. Ask away. I'm not sure how long we have, Sean, but at least 15 more minutes on the calendar. And on average, how long do you have to fast to get into ketosis? So my answer, it depends on where you're kind of starting with and what you define as ketosis. The average kind of people say is 0.5 millimolar of ketones of BHB in your blood is ketosis. We could argue that. For me, going from Thanksgiving feast with carbs and everything to fasting, it took me 2.5 days to get into ketosis. So that was from that state. Whereas if I already am on a low carb diet and I kind of I like my post-workout carbs, I hit 50 to 100 grams of carbs post-workout, then I try to roll back in. It takes me about, I'd say 18 hours to get back. So in the meantime though, you could also stay in ketosis all day long and never have to ask that question at all. So there's lots of different ways, but the fasting is where you really start to burn your own body fat eventually. As opposed to if you're just eating butter all day long, well, you're going to be either adding butter to your fat or you're going to be burning butter. So, and one other thing that we didn't say is that when you the studies kind of show that when you are in ketosis, or when you like eliminate carbohydrates from the diet, at least energy expenditure seems to go up, or at least like stay higher or go higher. So when you mentioned like 1,800 calories, when I am when I'm a sugar burner, I'm like 2,600 calories per day. And of course, it depends if I'm swimming or hitting high intensity interval training. When I'm in keto, I need to eat like, to not lose weight, I need to eat like 3,000 plus calories. And so that's a lot of fat. So I personally,
that's the metabolic advantage.
Right. Yeah. So that was my quick take. But yeah, Sean, like how long does it take you to get into ketosis after a cheat meal? And
it's similar. It's just like you're saying. I use it, like you said, sometimes to compensate for that cheat meal. But if you do glycogen depletion, like you were talking about with high intensity interval training, like you can get in so much quicker. And, maybe if you're using some thermogenics, you could probably get in quicker. And, there's so many factors to it. But yeah, I'd say it's how much glycogen you have around. Also, like how adapted you are. Like, again, going back to those MCT transporters, it's like how fat adapted are you at utilizing ketones, at creating ketones. So.
Okay, I think I missed a question. I'm going to scroll up. Was something like Ultima Replenisher, which has 0 calories but does have stevia interrupted fast. So I don't know what that product is. And so you do sometimes have to watch out for some amino acids.
It's really popular. Yeah.
Okay, I should know, I guess. But stevia itself will not, to me, break a fast. It doesn't have any calories. Some of the amino acids, just because, let's just talk about BCA supplements. We have a video where we actually put it through a bomb calorimeter. BCAs do have calories. And so, it was like 5 calories per gram or something, somewhere slightly above proteins, what it showed up as. Enough to break a fast, maybe not, depending if you eat like mountains of it or whatever. But some of these amino acids are actually caloric, and your body will probably use it. Just because the FDA doesn't. The FDA says that we can't like label solo amino acids as calories or protein or anything. Doesn't mean that they can't be utilized as calories. So I'm not sure what that product is. But the stevia, I'm not worried about. But if there's a ton of stuff in there, there's still a possibility that you're going to get some calories. Will that break your fast? Nah, I don't know how much there is in there.
Right. Yeah. I agree.
I'm trying to bulk up on keto. It's so hard because I'm never hungry. Amen to that. Agree. And that's why I put in carbs post-workout. I'm doing long walk after eating so I can eat 2 times a day. I want to eat, but I'm feeling so great. IF and eating high fat, lower protein. Same exact thing here. And it does. And it also hurts me that I'm slightly injured, so I'm not able to lift as hard as I want to be. My solution to this, and everyone's going to have different takes. If you want to gain on a keto style diet, it's expensive. You got to go like high quality, like supreme carnivore and eat a ton of protein, a ton of meat, a ton of quality steaks and eggs and all that, fish too. For me, finding carbs that don't screw you up, finding ones that like basically like carbs that don't give you gas or bloating, and throwing in as much as you could tolerate post-workout if you're lean enough, I think as long as it doesn't give you like, immune issues or anything like that. For me, it's organic white rice and organic sweet potatoes. 100 grams of carbs per day, for me, is where I had a bit of a change. And that was really I was never prouder of my physique before I got injured. So I was like I finally figured out what was working for me. And for me, it's 75 to 100 grams of carbs post-workout and then stop. And then I get hurt. So I'm going to get it back. But that's my take, is that full-blown keto, we'll disagree on this with a lot of people. You could ramp up protein. To me, I can't put on muscle without spiking insulin a little bit on the carbs personally. Sean might have a different take.
No, I think you need some metabolic flexibility there, like doing targeted and cyclical keto or doing carb backloading. But I would agree, like when I do like a zero carb, like carnivore, I struggle. I struggle to eat. Like I will lose weight like crazy. And
you're not hungry. Yeah.
No, like and the difference between like 20 grams, 50 grams of carbs, 100 grams of carbs, and zero carb is massive. Like I can tell you, just you can feel the difference. And when I do zero carb, like a carnivore style, I cannot eat. I just go right into fasting. I'm like, I forget to eat for 2 days. And that's just like, oh my God, like it's so different. So yes, I would agree on how you use your carbs for sure.
Yeah, but it does feel good. Like the intermittent fasting feels so good. You have to balance between listen, if you don't eat, you're not going to bulk. You're not going to gain weight. I mean, obviously, you're not going to just breathe in air and make muscle. So, I don't know, some people on exogenous hormones might be able to do that. But like for us mere mortals who are natty, you do have to eat, and so you have to balance. Like, to me, you got to find the right fasting window, and you got to do it when I work best in the morning. So I like to fast in the morning, and then like get a crazy awesome work session in. Then I like to train fasted, and then I'm going to crush a ton of food. And you need to like really like budget your food and realize that if you are doing this, you need a lot. Like if you're doing 2 meals a day, those meals need to be big if you want to bulk. And this is where I screw up. Like it's a lot of food, and for me, crush that food. And I know that I'm gonna have a little bit of crash afterwards, whether or not I use the berberine, whether or not I stim up. I'm gonna have a bit of a crash, and I accept that. And that's why you got to get your important work done before breaking the fast. But that's the thing. That's why I have to do that. And then I might have a little bit of a down slope, but to me, for the physique side of things and the not going crazy side of things, and it is worth it to me. So I think figuring out your workout fasting window area, and then you got to come prepared. Bulk cooking, like, listen, I know I need to eat that ground beef, those eggs, and that steak. And then I like to have protein first in the meal, and then I do the carbs, and the carbs will. The blood sugar impact seems to be blunted when you have protein and fats, or just protein before the carbs too. So to me, when you're getting like really nuanced and you're like down to like 12% body fat or less, timing does matter.
Yeah, agreed. Same thing.
Any other questions? Yeah, I love this kind of discussion. We haven't had one of these discussions for a while, Sean. So glad that your crew's brought in some keto people. Price Out Nation's kind of split on the low carb, high carb thing. Like, and so like obviously I'm a low carber, but I know like for me like zero carb is fun. You've got to get a lot of work done, and I don't want to be eating every 2 hours or riding the blood sugar roller coaster. I can get off of it, but I am putting on a lick of muscle at age 38. Not happening without some of that white rice post workout, and I am, like I said, natty. So that's my personal take right here.
Yeah, agreed.
And I don't see any other questions or anything. So how's so Sean, are you still in Dallas and everything? Kind of. Oh, here's a question. I tried post-workout carbs. I got stomach pain, so I'm doing now insulin spike with like 1 teaspoon of honey, some BCA, whey, and then I have my first meal of the day. Thanks, guys. Yeah, cool. And that's why I said like find the carb source that doesn't mess you up. And in terms of supplements, and I'm not sure if NMB is going to get involved in any of these, but like I've always been a big fan of cluster dextrin or the cyclic, the highly branched cyclic dextrins. I love dextrose. I do not like fructose. I don't like sucrose. I feel like trash with fruit personally, and I've kind of said that lately. But I do love me some dextrose. Like, so the candies that have dextrose are usually like the sweet tarts, the runts. Spree's been my big one lately. Post-workout, like I have some. That's when I like to have some fun. And for me, dextrose never messes me up. It's just straight up glucose, basically. Right. Yeah. And so yeah, tinker with different carbs. A lot of people like oats. I'm so on oats and the wheat. I can't do the wheat. So like that's the carb source that just kills me. So I know that if I'm going to splurge and have pizza, I'll probably not feel great afterwards. But I think there's certain carb sources you got to try to find that supplement or food based or candy based that might make you feel better than others.
There's an enzyme called glutalytic that Deerland Enzyme makes that really helps digest gluten, that I would recommend. Like, if you do have some things that you don't digest well, and especially because you've stopped eating them because of a low-carb diet, that's going to exacerbate that. Like if you have like lactose intolerance or whatever, then I would compensate with some enzymes when you want to have that cheat meal or that occasional indulgence.
Definitely. And don't forget to chew your foods, folks. The amylase, one of the digestive enzymes right there in your saliva. We're just horfing down food without chewing. Like, sit down, relax, enjoy your food. We're not going anywhere right now, so enjoy your food and chew like a lot. And the digestion process actually begins like right at the mouth. So don't forget that step. That might help a little bit with the carbs too. Does fasting help on lowering blood sugar when you're borderline diabetic? Well, Sean, that's more up your alley because you have the letters behind your name, but I'm going to say absolutely yes.
Yeah, I would agree. You just have to be careful. I'm borderline diabetic insinuates type 2 diabetes. there's no real borderline type 1 diabetic.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm assuming that they're saying that they're insulin resistant, glucose intolerant, type 2 diabetic, borderline there. And certainly, most likely it's kind of that syndrome X with the obesity, et cetera. So yes, doing fasting, doing exercise, not being sedentary is going to help dramatically. Just taking a walk 10 minutes after you eat, for 10 minutes after you eat, the postprandial stroll can have a dramatic effect on blood glucose. But certainly fasting is a tool. I'd be careful with it. I don't know to what degree, you have sensitivities with hyper swings with the blood glucose. So I would be careful and experiment with fasting with your physician. Start with, I wouldn't roll right into extended fasts. I would be doing intermittent fasts, etc. So,
yeah, and honestly, data is the most important thing. I would emphasize, if you can find a doctor who, if you have a high A1C level, you might be able to get insurance to help cover for it. It's not cheap, but the constant glucose monitor.
Yeah.
Every 5 minutes you get an update. At least like the Dexcom G6. You learn so much about your body. Certain things happen, like weird things too, where if you eat too late at night, or if I eat too late at night, my whole next day is effed up. It's crazy. It's like things that you don't know that actually matter come into play. And so I do recommend finding a doctor who will get you, especially if your A1C is borderline high,